Hello, dear viewers. This is Andre Belli and my new story on the channel, Alien Relatives. This piece of junk is going to the dump, Polina. The breadwinner in the house needs absolute comfort for his spine, not those designer stools of yours. Andre puffed like an overloaded steam boiler, shoving a giant piece of polyurethane monstrosity through the living room doorway. The acid green structure shimmered with LEDs and smelled of cheap plastic and Chinese manufacturing. It was the throne of an imperial gamer. A chair with a built-in massager, cup holders, and speakers in the headrest. For the sake of this monster, her husband had just mercilessly thrown out into the hallway the elegant lightwood orthopedic chair that Polina had bought with her own money. Polina brushed an invisible speck of dust from the sleeve of her cardigan and leaned against the doorframe. Interesting term. Especially considering the last time you contributed anything to the family budget was 3 months ago, and that was a bag of promotional pasta. I'm investing in the future, Andre snapped, dropping the green monster with a thud onto the historic oak parquet floor. There was a sickening crunch. Crypt is at the bottom right now, and for analytics, I need a comfortable workspace. The parquet flooring, by the way, wasn't just planks. It was the pride of Polina's mother, Tamara Ilyinishna, who laid it back when the word kripita sounded like the name of a disease. The apartment belonged to her mother. A spacious, bright 3-room apartment in a good residential area was given to Polina for temporary use, while Tamara Ilyinishna was enjoying herself at her dacha, growing a collector's variety of vape and building up the neighbors' houses. She hoped to live happily ever after, free of mortgages and other people's landlords. But Andre perceived the lack of rent as a personal bonus for simply existing. Polina's brain worked like a Swiss watch. She didn't throw tantrums, didn't smash plates, or theatrically wring her hands. She had a Nordic character, forged by her work as a landscape designer. She regularly had to explain to wealthy clients why a palm tree wouldn't grow in Siberian loam, so her composure was ironclad. In her personal classification, Andre was a creeping weed. Even the slightest weakness will stifle a useful plant. Okay, Polina said calmly, looking at the scratch left by the wheel on the floor. Invest. Just keep in mind that this month's utilities are from your investments. Again, you're talking about your pennies. Her husband plopped philosophically into a chair, which immediately emitted an unpleasant synthetic sound. You're a petty woman of the field. You don't see the big picture. Polina didn't argue. She silently walked over to the distribution board in the hallway, flicked the right switch, and pulled a small padlock out of her pocket. Having deftly manipulated the eyelets above the door of the board, she snapped the latch into place in the living room. The acidic LEDs went out. The gaming computer, which Andre had been assembling piece by piece for 6 months, gave a death squeak and went out. "Hey, you turned it off," came from the depths of the green throne. "It happens," Polina responded loudly, throwing on her coat. "Old wiring. They say that to fix it, you need big picture thinking." And the paid internet bill, by the way, too. I'll be back in the evening. She left the apartment accompanied by inarticulate curses. The Count, a fat British chief with eyes the color of old copper, watched her go with an approving glance and went to sharpen his claws on the new chair, rightly concluding that this green leatherette had been brought for that very purpose. The days turned into weeks, and Andre's everyday impudence grew exponentially. His financial philosophy resembled a black hole. Polina's money went on groceries, household cleaning products, cat food, and light bulbs. Andre's money went into projects. One day he'd buy a course on breathing techniques to attract cash flow. The next he'd drag home a professional coffee machine the size of a tractor engine. The machine spat boiling water and guzzled kilowatts of electricity, but Andre proudly sipped a thimbleful of bitter slop from it in the morning, imagining himself a Roman patrician. At some point, his status as the owner of the estate finally went to his head. Polina. She realized this when she returned from the project earlier than usual. The hallway smelled strongly of cheap vapes and unwashed sneakers. The sound of laughter wafted from the kitchen. Andre had brought colleagues, the same unrecognized startup geniuses. "I'll totally remodel this place," Bass declared to her husband. "We'll knock down the partition here and make a loft. My mother-in-law's out there potting in the garden. She couldn't care less about her presence here." Polina quietly removed her shoes. "He'll knock down the partition, he'll make a loft, a load-bearing wall in a prefabricated building? Aha!" She walked into the kitchen. 3 guys, lounging on her favorite chairs, were crumbling pistachios right onto the clean tablecloth. "Good evening, boys," she sang, leaning against the refrigerator. The smile on her face was so cold that the beer in the guests' glasses should have been covered with a crust of ice. Discussing architectural solutions? The guests hesitated. Andre, sensing a threat to his authority, scowled. "Polya, we're busy here. Make us some sandwiches or something." Male logic is an amazing phenomenon. It often stumbles upon reality out of nowhere. Polina didn't raise her voice. She smoothly walked up to the table, raked all the open packages of snacks into an armful, picked up 2 unfinished bottles of beer, and calmly threw it all into the trash can under the sink. In this house, they eat from plates. He who litters on the table feeds the cockroaches on the street. She said the right word. And now, gentlemen architects, the tour is over. The exit is over there. Listen, Andreyuka, let's go. One of the guests jumped up hurriedly, nearly knocking over his chair. When the door slammed behind the guys, Andre turned to his wife, flushed with anger. "Are you embarrassing me in front of the boys? I'm the boss here. Are you a guest here, Andryusha?" Polina gently corrected him. "And a guest who hasn't paid for his stay." 3 bills landed in the mailbox yesterday. We're 3 months behind. On utilities, $18,000 in total. I don't have any cash out right now. I invested in tokens. Tokens. The toilet doesn't flush. Tomorrow my mom is coming to pick up the seedlings and the bills. If you don't put the money on the table, she'll give you such a cash out you'll be counting your investments in the emergency room. Andrei just waved her hand dismissively. For him, Tamara Ilyinishna was something of a mythical character. It seemed to exist, but somewhere far away in the suburbs. Digging the earth, it posed no danger. And that was his most fatal mistake, a mistake worthy of a Darwin Award in the field of family relationships. Tamara Ilyinishna was no dandelion. In the harsh 90s, she worked as a construction foreman, chasing drunken masons with a crowbar, and knew a swear word better than any bosun, although in everyday life she preferred an icy, academic tone. She had a short, geometrically perfect silver haircut, an upright posture, and the look of someone who can estimate the cost of concrete by eye. The next day, Polina went to a site on the other side of town to complete a complex terrace project with an intricate juniper planting. Her phone vibrated around lunchtime. It was their downstairs neighbor, Zenaida. Zenaida was the local radar. Polechka, my dear, hello. Have you started renovations there? The neighbor whispered into the phone. Hello, Aunt Zena? No. What? Are we making noise? Don't make noise. There's your Andriusha yelling in the stairwell, and your mother came out and slammed the door. My chandelier even shook and went down. His white face pressed his lips together. He waved his hands after her. Don't kill each other there. Polina sensed something was wrong. Mom arrived, he was home. She dropped her tools, handed the instructions to the assistant, jumped in the car, and pressed the gas pedal. The navigator showed 40 minutes, including traffic. Those 40 minutes seemed like a long time. Mom didn't answer her calls. The beeps went off into thin air. That was a bad sign. Polina dashed into the yard, parked crookedly, nearly knocking off the bumper of the neighbor's Toyota, and ran up to the third floor. The front door was unlocked. The hallway smelled of stale coffee. Andrei was once again mocking his gadget. Polina stepped into the living room. Her husband was lounging comfortably in his ugly green chair. His laptop lay on his lap, a smug, victorious grin on his face. He didn't even flinch when he saw his wife. Oh, he's here early. Polina glanced at the empty kitchen counter where they usually left receipts. Where's Mom? Your mom? He chuckled dismissively and took a sip of coffee. She went to her registered address to work in the garden beds. She showed up here, started flaunting her license at me, waving papers. Give me money, at least 6,000 for the electricity. What am I, an ATM? Polina stepped closer. Her voice dropped an octave, becoming frighteningly quiet. You rudely kicked out my mother, telling her to get lost even though she was asking for money for the utilities for her apartment where we live, Polina said indignantly. Oh, don't start that nonsense about her apartment. Andrei rolled his eyes dramatically, slamming his laptop shut. We're a family. I'm the man here. My house, my rules. She started lecturing me about the parquet flooring, about how I'm a slacker. I told her point blank, I don't like the exit there. Let her be grateful that I even agreed to live in this old Soviet place. Polina tried to call her mother again to apologize, when suddenly the door swung open with a bang. It wasn't just a knock, it was the sound of a hinge being knocked out. Tamara Ilyinishna was standing in the hallway, and she wasn't alone. Polina froze with the phone in her hand. Her mother looked impeccable. Her light trench coat was unwrinkled. The silk scarf around her neck was tied in a perfect knot. But her presence disrupted the whole picture of aristocratic aesthetics. Behind Tamara Ilyinishna, two burly men in blue stevedores, overalls stomped about, reeking of tobacco and rugged physical strength. And in Tamara Ilyinishna's hands clutched a formidable adjustable wrench. "So," her mother said, walking into the living room, as if it were a troop inspection before a parade. "Hello, Polina. Sorry for not knocking." The door felt a bit flimsy when you opened it. Andrei pressed himself into his neon green chair. His entire body tightened in a split second. He resembled a slug that had suddenly been sprinkled with salt. "Tamara Ilyinishna, what's wrong?" he choked. "What's wrong with me?" "I've come to collect my dividends, Andriusha," his mother-in-law said, as tenderly as a boa constrictor to a rabbit. She gestured gracefully with an adjustable wrench toward the enormous coffee machine. "Boys, take this chrome moonshine still. Just be careful, don't scratch my kitchen." The big guys nodded silently and moved toward the countertop. "Hey, stop, this is my property. It's worth $120,000. Andrei jumped up, trying to block the mover's path. But one of them, the size of a small bear, simply shouldered him aside as if he were a feather. "Yours, now mine," Tamara Ilyinishna snapped. "The rent is $18,000. And you, parasite, scratched my oak parquet with your lime green throne. Restoration will cost about $50,000. This is robbery. I'll call the police," Andrei flared, grabbing the phone. "Call." Tamara Ilyinishna leaned comfortably against the doorframe, crossing her arms over her chest. "At the same time, you'll tell the police officers why you're living in my apartment without registration. You're not paying your bills and damaging other people's property. Maybe we can charge it as intentional damage or petty hooliganism, and your mother Nadia will be happy to know her son is now homeless. By the way, I already called her." Andrei froze. The mention of his own mother worked better than any taser. Nadezhda Viktorovna was a stern woman. She'd considered Andrei a blockhead since childhood, and, unlike Tamara, she hit him not with metaphors, but with a rolling pin. "What did you tell her?" "It's true, Andriusha said you decided to move in with her. For good." At that moment, the movers, with a strained huff, tore the coffee machine from the table. "Tamara Ilyinishna, well, Mom." Andrei tried to turn on his charm, which at that moment looked like a hyena's smile. "Well, we're family." "Well, I got carried away?" "Yes, I'll find that money tomorrow." "Tomorrow started 5 minutes ago, when you sent me away," the mother-in-law retorted calmly. "Boys, load up the machine. Now let's move on to dessert." She glanced at the green gaming chair. No, not the throne, Andre howled, throwing himself at the chair with his body, blocking it with his body. Polina chuckled quietly, sitting down on the windowsill. She wasn't going to interfere. This was better than any TV series. Graceful, tough, and without a single shout from them. "Get up," Tamara Ilganishna commanded. Her voice clanged like metal. Andre reluctantly peeled himself away from the polyurethane abundance. "Polina, tell her this is my workplace. I have graphs, tables, the stock exchange there." Polina shrugged. "You said yourself, this is your home, your rules. And this is Mom's apartment. So Mom's rules..." We landscapers call it topiary, when we cut off everything unnecessary to make the shape beautiful. Right now, Mom is giving our family a topiary haircut. The movers, having carried the coffee machine into the hallway, returned for the chair. One of them, having assessed the dimensions of the structure, he scratched his head. "The owner won't fit through the door entirely. We need to disassemble it." "Excellent." Tamara Elnishna nodded and handed Andre an adjustable wrench. "Unpack your junk. I'll give you 10 minutes. You." Andre finally lost it, blushing so much that his face almost merged with the neon light of the mouse on the table. "Take your square meters. I'll find myself an apartment. I'll find a normal woman who will appreciate my potential." He darted into the bedroom, pulled out his suitcases, and began frantically throwing his things in there. T-shirts, some wires, protein bars. Polina watched this process with stony calm. Inside her, there was no regret or fear. There was only incredible relief, as if she had been walking for a long time in tight shoes and finally took them off. A person who does not respect the boundaries of another person's home will never respect the one inside it. Lives. Tamara Lyanishna approached her daughter, quietly hugged her shoulders, and whispered so that the soloist with the suitcase wouldn't hear. "Sorry I'm taking the coffee machine, but it's eating up electricity like a stadium floodlight. I'll sell it. I'll just pay off your utilities for 6 months in advance, and with the rest we'll buy you that Japanese pruning shears you wanted." Polina laughed heartily. 10 minutes later, the front door slammed, leaving behind a light draft and the smell of inexpensive eau de cologne. Andre left, dragging his suitcase behind him and hugging a piece of green armrest from a chair with one hand, which he refused to unscrew. The movers, having received a generous tip from Tamara Lyanishna, carried the rest of the inventory out into the stairwell. The apartment became unnaturally spacious and light. Graf the cat, crawling out from behind the sofa, approached the place where an ugly chair. He sniffed the scratch on the parquet floor with disgust, shook his hind legs as if shaking off dirt, and jumped onto Polina's windowsill. Tamara Elnishna walked into the kitchen as if she owned the place, opened the cabinet, and took out a good old copper tsezve. "Well, Polya?" she said, turning on the stove. "Turkish coffee. And let's go. Get a proper chair this evening. Your back is worth more than any other person's investment." Thank you all for listening. This was Andre Beely. Until next time, M.